Dad's birthday dinner was supposed to be simple roast chicken, mashed potatoes, and the same familiar argument simmering beneath every forced smile. I didn't expect a gift box with a glossy white label addressed to me handed across the table like some kind of trophy. I didn't expect the laughter sharp synchronized, almost rehearsed, and I definitely didn't expect that the words printed on that label, "Tiny Cashier Job," would be the spark that burned the last thread of patience I'd been stitching together for years. They thought they were putting me in my place. They didn't know they were setting me free. I set the salad bowl down in the center of the table and wiped my hands on my apron, brushing off a fleck of basil. Mom immediately adjusted the bowl half an inch to the left, as if my placement offended the god of symmetry. Typical. Dad sat at the head of the table, grinning in the self-satisfied way he always did on his birthday, like the entire world existed for the sole purpose of celebrating him. Mom hovered at his shoulder, glowing with her usual pride. And Marcus, my older brother, sat there scrolling his phone with the kind of relaxed superiority that only the chosen son could afford. I took my seat quietly. Dad raised his glass. "To my family," he said, "and to the ones who make us proud." He looked directly at Marcus. Not at me. Never at me. Everyone clinked their glasses. Mine almost slipped. My palms were already damp. Before dinner, Marcus said, suddenly, a smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth, "We have something for Lana." For me, I blinked. Mom gave the sort of smile she used whenever she was about to deliver a backhanded compliment. "It's just a little something." We all thought it was fitting. Dad reached under the table and placed a white gift box in front of me. Neat, glossy. Too carefully prepared to be spontaneous. I frowned. "What does this go on?" Marcus nodded, eyebrows raised. "Open it." Some instinct twisted in my gut. My hands felt cold, but I lifted the lid. Inside was a miniature plastic cash register. Bright red buttons, cheap display screen, a child's toy. But it wasn't the toy that punched the air from my lungs. It was the label taped to the inside of the lid. A printed laminated tag in bold black capital letters, "Tiny Cashier Job." For a moment, the room went silent. Then the laughter hit. Dad slapped his knee. Mom giggled behind her hand. Marcus actually wheezed. "Oh, come on, sweetheart," Mom said between laughs. "It's just a joke." "A little motivation," Marcus added. "Since you're still, scanning cereal boxes at 28? Dad finished shaking his head. "I mean, good grief." My chest tightened. Heat crept up my neck, not from embarrassment, but from something sharper, something I'd learned to swallow for years. "Guys," I said quietly, "this is funny." Marcus cut in. "Lighten up." I stared at the toy cash register, at the label, at my own reflection in the shiny plastic. Something cracked inside me, quiet, thin, like the snap of a matchstick. But I did what I always did. I forced a smile, because in this house, showing hurt was the ultimate weakness. Dad raised his fork. All right, the joke's over." "Lana, why don't you help your mother serve the chicken?" Of course that was my role tonight. Serve. Stay quiet. Disappear. I gathered plates while they kept laughing, the sound echoing against the walls like a taunt carved into the wood. The toy register lay in its box, mocking me with its bright, childish innocence. I carried dishes to the kitchen. Mom didn't help. She never helped. I could hear them from the dining room, Dad complaining about work, Marcus bragging about his promotion, Mom praising him like he'd personally invented the concept of employment. And then, really, Dad scoffed, "Lana's still at that entry-level thing." "What does she even do?" "Count coins," Marcus snorted. "She probably gets excited seeing a $20 bill. Their laughter stung more now that I was alone with my thoughts. I gripped the counter until my knuckles whitened. No one in that house had the faintest grasp of who I actually was. Their understanding of my life hovered at the surface, blind to everything moving beneath it. To them, the tiny cashier job was a punchline, never a disguise. They couldn't begin to imagine the scale of what had been unfolding quietly behind my spreadsheets, behind the encryption keys, behind the long nights they dismissed as overtime at the register. While Marcus obsessed over office politics and Dad kept polishing the same old stories from decades ago, I was charting a different world entirely. one they never believed I had the intellect or stamina to enter, let alone master. The daughter they belittled had spent 3 years designing a private banking framework so intricate, so discreet, that even professionals with decades of experience wouldn't have recognized the architect behind it. They operated on assumptions. I operated on precision. And that difference was about to change everything, mine. They didn't know the power of being underestimated. I took a deep breath and walked back out with their plates. Dad smiled at me like nothing happened. Mom gave me that condescending pat on the arm. Marcus tossed me his empty glass. Refill. I took it wordlessly. They kept talking. I kept laughing, kept living inside the bubble where they were the superior ones and I was the daughter who never lived up to anything. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel pain from it. I felt clarity, sharp, cold clarity. When dinner ended, Mom stood gathering her purse. Don't forget to take the gift home, Lana. It's symbolic. Oh, it's symbolic, I whispered. Very symbolic. Dad clapped me on the shoulder. Someday you'll thank us for pushing you, Marcus added. Maybe you can put it on your desk at work. I smiled, and that smile terrified me because it wasn't polite. It was decisive. Final. When they left, I washed the dishes one by one, silence flooding the house. The toy cash register sat on the dining table like a challenge. I dried my hands and picked up my phone. My fingers didn't shake. I opened my hidden apps. Encrypted systems only I could access. Financial channels protected behind layers no one in my family could even name. Dashboards spread across offshore holdings that mapped the empire I built in silence. In less than 20 seconds, I pulled up the metrics that only 4 people in the world had permission to access. And I whispered, "Let them laugh." The numbers on my screen glowed back at me. 2.5 B assets under management. Projected 2024 growth, 14%. Private banking portfolio, verified my empire. Quiet, invisible, real. Dad's birthday gift didn't break me. It crowned me. I powered off my phone, grabbed the trash bag, tossed the toy cash register inside, and tied it shut with a clean, sharp knot. As I carried it out to the bin, the night air hit my face. Cool, still, free. Everyone in that room assumed I was the least significant presence there. None of them understood how wrong they were. Tomorrow morning, Forbes would tell them the truth. The trash can lid clanged shut behind me, but the sound didn't settle anything in my chest. I stood in the quiet driveway, breathing in air that tasted different, somehow less like home, more like escape. The porch light flickered above the front door, making the shadows beneath the maple tree ripple like warning signs. Maybe they were. Inside, Dad's laughter still echoed in my ears, replaying louder than it had been at the table. Marcus's smirk flashed like a neon sign. Mom's soft, complicit giggle threaded itself right through my ribs. I wasn't supposed to hear them after I walked out with the dishes, but I did. Dad muttering, "She'll never amount to more than that cashier counter," and Marcus chiming in, "You spoiled her by letting her think she could be more." They never imagined I stood in the hallway frozen, absorbing every word. The voices faded when I stepped back into the house, but the resentment stayed with the same stubborn weight I had carried since high school. I moved toward my childhood bedroom, walking past the framed photos on the wall, every one of them starring Marcus in baseball uniforms, graduation robes, work badges. I was in maybe 3 pictures, all in the background. The door closed behind me with a soft click. I sat on the edge of the bed, pulled out my phone again, and unlocked the encrypted folder I had never let anyone glimpse. A list of names popped up: silent investors, private clients, and 2 international partners. Most people assumed Elle Pierce belonged to a veteran banker in her 40s, not a 28-year-old woman whose own family still treated her like the kid sent to set the table. I scrolled through messages: portfolio allocation request approved. Confirming wire transfer for quarter close. Need revised risk model for energy sector. Every line felt like oxygen. I tapped open my dashboard and checked the live numbers again. The digits pulsed with quiet certainty, my empire breathing beneath the surface, while my family believed I was drowning in minimum wage monotony. I hadn't built any of it out of ambition. I built it because no one ever expected anything from me. That kind of invisibility becomes an opportunity when you learn to weaponize it. A soft knock came at the door. Lana Mom's voice hushed as though guilt could be whispered away. "Your father is going to bed. Don't forget to say goodnight." I stared at the door without moving. "I'm fine, Mom." "You seemed tense." Her pause stretched long enough to reveal the truth. She wasn't concerned. She was checking to make sure I hadn't ruined Dad's birthday mood. "I'm fine," I repeated. She lingered, waiting for me to comfort her discomfort, but when I didn't, her footsteps retreated down the hallway. I leaned back against the headboard, letting the mattress hold the weight I never showed anyone. My room was still the same pale blue it had been when I was 17. Same dresser, same desk, same quiet proof that in this house time only moved for Marcus. I opened my laptop and plugged in a drive disguised as a lipstick tube. The screen blinked, loading the interface of my real-world clean charts, risk analyses, client memos, digital ledgers only I could navigate. A notification pulsed in the corner. Incoming message from Fenton. My breath caught. He never messaged at night. I clicked it open. "Need confirmation on your attendance tomorrow. Forbes is reaching out. They're naming you in the piece unless you choose anonymity. Decisions must be made by morning." My heart thudded. Forbes. Not a rumor, not a possibility, a certainty. The article wasn't just about the portfolio's growth, it was about the architect behind it, me. For a moment I couldn't feel my hands. I pressed my palm flat against the quilt, grounding myself. The exposure itself never frightened me. What unsettled me was the stretch of time before the truth finally stepped into the light. In this house, my achievements would never be seen as earned. They'd be treated as accidents, loopholes, favors I didn't deserve. If Dad found out tonight, he'd mock it. If Marcus found out, he'd claim he always knew I had potential, which was a lie even he wouldn't say convincingly. If Mom found out, she'd panic about what people might think. Tomorrow would scorch all of that. But tonight, I needed silence. I typed my response, "Use my real name." My finger hovered over me for a long second. Then I pressed it. A calm washed over me, steady, warm, solid, like stepping into a room where no one had ever doubted me. I spent the next hour refining documents Fenton had forwarded, double-checking the numbers that would appear in the feature. My focus sharpened the way it always did when I worked in the world that belonged solely to me. By midnight, my eyelids were heavy, but my mind wouldn't quiet. I lay back staring at the ceiling fan, turning slow circles, stirring air that felt stale with old expectations. Around 1 a.m, voices drifted from down the hall. Dad again, low, irritated. "Girls need direction. She's wasting her life." Mom murmured something soft, apologetic. Then Marcus, louder, "She should be grateful we even tease her. At least it means we care." My jaw clenched so tightly I felt a pulse in my temple. Grateful. Every sneer they tossed my way came back into focus. Every attempt to shrink me finally showed its true shape. All those years of being told I'd never measure up settled into a single, undeniable truth. They had been wrong about me every step of the way. I pulled the blanket up over my chest and closed my eyes. Tomorrow morning would change everything. Forbes would expose the truth. My tiny cashier job would become the punchline to their failure to see me. And when the world knew who I really was, this house, this entire family dynamic would crack like fragile porcelain. But the thought didn't scare me. It steadied me. Somewhere between exhaustion and adrenaline, I drifted into sleep with one single clear promise forming in my mind. If they wanted me small tonight, they should have cherished the moment. Because in the morning, the world would know exactly how big I'd become. Sunlight crept across my bedroom ceiling long before I opened my eyes, thin and sharp, like it was slicing through the air on purpose. I lay still, listening to the house settle pipes humming floorboards, shifting the faint clatter of dishes downstairs. Mom always moved quietly in the mornings, as if volume itself could trigger Dad's temper. I reached for my phone on the nightstand. 2 new emails. A message from Fenton arrived first. Then a headline from Forbes lit up my screen. My pulse spiked. I opened the Forbes message first. Feature finalized. Publishing at 10 a.m. ET. Congratulations, Ms. Pierce. The words blurred for a second. I blinked hard, letting them settle into place. Pierce. My last name. My mind. My work. My recognition. Dad still thought I spent my days counting coupons. I sat up slowly, the room colder than I remembered. Maybe it was just me, my head already in a world far beyond these walls. Downstairs, Dad's voice boomed louder now. Where's the coffee? Lana was supposed to brew it before she went to bed. A familiar sting tightened in my throat. Even on the edge of my biggest morning, he still expected servitude. Mom said something too soft to hear. Dad huffed, irritated. I swung my legs out of bed, feet touching the worn rug I'd had since middle school. Everything in this house felt frozen in time, except me. I'd outgrown it years ago, just didn't know it until now. I dressed quietly, dark jeans, a simple blouse, hair pulled back. No makeup. If they looked at me today, I wanted them to see the truth plainly. For once, I walked downstairs without shrinking. Mom greeted me with a nervous smile. Dad didn't even look up from his newspaper. Marcus sat at the table eating cereal like he owned the kitchen. "You're up late," Marcus said, glancing at the clock. "What cashier shifts start at noon now?" Dad chuckled. I didn't answer. Mom hurried over. "Lana, sweetie, your father needed coffee earlier. You know he has his morning routine. That routine always superseded everyone else's, especially mine." "I wasn't aware I was on duty," I said lightly. Mom stiffened. Dad lowered the paper just enough to glare. "What's with the attitude?" he asked. "You're home. You pitch in. That's how this works. That's how they worked conditional love based on compliance." I poured myself a glass of water. "I have things to do today." Marcus choked on a laugh. At the store, big day at the register, Dad grinned proud of his son's cruelty. My fingers tightened around the glass. I pictured the Forbes homepage already prepared to detonate through their illusions. 10 a.m. couldn't come fast enough. Mom, sensing a shift she didn't understand, cleared her throat. "Be nice boys. Lana's working hard." Dad scoffed. Hard at what? She chose that job. It's not like anyone stopped her from finding something real. Something real. The irony nearly made me dizzy. 8:45 a.m. I checked the time again as I headed for the coat closet. Dad wasn't finished. "Where do you think you're going?" "You haven't helped clean up breakfast." I slipped my arm into my jacket. "I have a meeting." Marcus laughed. "With who, the bargain bin manager?" "No," I said, grabbing my keys. "Someone who respects me." The room went silent. Their confusion was almost sweet. Dad's brow lowered. "Don't get smart with me, young lady." "I'm not," I said. "Just honest." I stepped outside before he could respond. The morning air hit me clean and cold, clearing my head the way a blunt reality check never would. I walked toward my car parked at the curb. The sky was bright, the kind of crisp blue that feels like it's daring you to change your life. I unlocked the door, slid inside, and stared straight ahead. My hands trembled not from fear, but from anticipation. 8:58 a.m., 22 minutes until Forbes stripped away the last layer of who they thought I was. My phone buzzed, a message from Fenton. "Your choice was the right one. Be ready." Ready. I'd been ready for years. I drove to the coffee shop downtown where I often worked before shifts, neutral ground away from Dad's expectations, and the weight of a house that had never felt like home. The place smelled like cinnamon and fresh beans. People chatted softly at tables, oblivious to the tectonic shift happening inside me. I ordered a cappuccino, sat near a window, and opened my laptop. 9:15 a.m. My inbox was already ticking with quiet movement, client updates pending approvals numbers I usually devoured with calm discipline. Not today. Today felt like standing at the edge of something huge. A shadow fell over my table. "Long shift today," Marcus's voice teased in my memory, but it wasn't him, just a stranger reaching for sugar packets nearby. I shook off the thought. My father's words echoed next. "She'll never amount to more than that cashier counter." They wouldn't just eat those words soon, they'd choke on them. At 9:59, my palms turned warm, heart beating steady and strong. I refreshed the page. The moment felt slow and stretched like the universe holding its breath. Then, 10 a.m., the headline flashed onto the screen in bold, unmistakable capital letters. the rising private banker behind a $2.5 billion empire. Meet Lana Pierce. My throat tightened. Not with tears, those were gone long ago. This was vindication pulsing straight through my chest. A photo of my hands on a keyboard, my name, my numbers, my world. The toy register was gone for good. Their jokes no longer touched me. Any attempt to shrink my worth had finally lost its power. Just truth. A truth my family had refused to see. My phone started vibrating, call after call, message after message. Unknown numbers, business inquiries, press requests. I closed the laptop gently and leaned back in my chair as a wave of calm swept over me. Somewhere across town, Dad was probably still at the table reading the paper, and any minute now, his world would tilt, his voice would catch, his pride would fracture. The daughter he mocked at breakfast was about to outrank every achievement he had ever praised Marcus for, and I didn't even need to be in the room to watch the collapse. The revenge had already begun. By the time I pulled into the driveway, the air around the house felt wrong too, still too heavy, like the entire street was waiting for something to explode. The curtains in the living room twitched a sign Marcus was peeking out. He'd never been subtle. I shut the car door quietly and walked up the steps. Mom opened the front door before I could touch the handle. Her expression was tight, pale, stretched thin, like she'd been holding her breath for an hour. "Lana," she whispered, "your father is upset." Upset. A predictable word for a predictable man. I stepped past her into the foyer. Marcus stood near the sofa, arms crossed, jaw clenched in a way that looked less like anger and more like panic. Dad was in his recliner, but not relaxed, leaning forward, elbows on his knees, staring at the TV, as if it had just betrayed him personally. The TV displayed the Forbes homepage. My name was still on the screen. No one spoke at first. Only the sound of Dad's ragged breathing filled the room like he'd run a marathon he didn't know he'd signed up for. I exhaled slowly. "So I said, I take it you've seen the article." Dad finally looked at me, eyes sharp, almost glassy. "You tell me," he growled, "what the hell this is." "A feature of my work," I answered calmly. "You're familiar with Forbes." Marcus's eyes flared. "Are you kidding me right now, Lana? This says you're—" He pointed at the screen. "This says you're managing billions." "Billions. That's correct." His hands flew up. "How you work at a grocery store?" "No," I corrected. "I work from behind a grocery store counter. There's a difference." Dad stood abruptly. "You lied." Mom, standing behind him, whispered something too soft to catch. "I didn't lie," I replied. "You assumed. I let you." "That's the same thing," Dad barked. A familiar heat rose in my chest. Not shame, not fear, just exhaustion. "It's not my job to correct your assumptions about my intelligence," Marcus scoffed. "Why wouldn't you tell us?" The laugh slipped out before I could stop it. "Because every time I did something even slightly unexpected, Dad called it luck, and you called it cute." Mom pressed a hand to her chest. "Sweetheart, we didn't know. That's the point," I said gently. "You never tried to." Dad's face darkened. "Are you telling me you built this empire?" He said the word like it was poison while you were living under my roof. "Partly," I said. "And partly after I moved into my apartment." Marcus blinked. "You have an apartment." "Yes," I said. "I pay for it with my non-tiny paycheck." A vein pulsed at Dad's temple. "You've been keeping secrets. I've been building a life I corrected." He jabbed a finger at the screen. "You're not qualified to be doing any of this banking nonsense. You're a cashier." Mom winced. The room fell silent long enough for the furnace to click on. "Dad, I said the cashier job is a cover. It always has been. It's quiet, flexible, invisible. It gave me the time and anonymity I needed to build something meaningful." "You're not capable of something like this," he snapped. There it was, the sentence that had shaped my entire childhood. I met his stare. "You've been wrong about me for 28 years. Marcus shook his head slowly, disbelief turning into something more vicious. "You made us look stupid." I raised an eyebrow. "You didn't need my help." His mouth opened, but no sound came out. Dad took a step toward me. "You will fix this, right now. You will call whoever published that nonsense and shut it down. That's not an option. You will make it an option. I didn't move. The story is already everywhere. Mom's voice trembled. People are calling us, asking questions. Your father can't go to work like this. Marcus added, my coworkers sent me the link in a group chat. They think I knew I look like an idiot. You're worried about embarrassment, I asked. You should be too, Marcus snapped. Your face is on every newsfeed right now. That was intentional. Dad pointed at the screen again. You're going to take it down. You're not dragging this family into some internet circus. I let their outrage swirl and settle like dust in sunlight. You don't own my accomplishments, I said quietly. You never did. The silence that followed was colder than the November wind outside. Dad sank back into his chair, chest heaving. You're going to regret this, he muttered. All this fame, all this attention, none of it lasts. It's not fame, I said. It's recognition, for work I've done for years. He slammed his fist on the arm of the recliner. Work you weren't meant to do. Mom flinched. I straightened. Say what you really mean. He hesitated just long enough to reveal the truth. You're not the one who was supposed to succeed, he said finally. Marcus was. You were supposed to support him. There it was, the rotten root, the real reason behind every dismissal, every belittlement. I felt the final thread snap inside me. Whatever tether had kept me tied to their approval unraveled completely. I'll pack my things, I said softly. Mom reached for me. Lana, don't be dramatic. I'm not angry, I said, stepping back. I'm done, Marcus scoffed, but it sounded shaky. Where will you even go? My apartment, I said. The one I pay for with my terrible cashier salary. Dad looked away, jaw tight. As I turned toward the stairs, Mom's voice broke. At least stay for dinner. It's your father's birthday. I paused at the bottom step. Something bitter and strangely freeing rose inside me. I gave him a better gift than dinner, I said. The truth. Their silence chased me up the stairs like the end of something old and the start of something unshakably mine. The quiet upstairs felt almost unreal, like the house itself was waiting to see if I'd actually go through with leaving. I stood in the doorway of my old bedroom, the same space where I'd spent years convincing myself that keeping the peace was the same as being loved. The sunlight stretched across the carpet in thin strips, touching the edges of furniture that had never been replaced, because no one believed my life would ever expand beyond these four walls. I pulled my suitcase from under the bed. The zipper stuck for a moment before sliding open with a low scrape. That sound was louder than anything happening downstairs. As I folded shirts into neat squares, I realized how little I actually owned here. A few jeans, 2 blouses, a sweater Mom bought because she thought it made me look softer, a stack of books Marcus had once mocked me for reading because they had too many finance words. None of it felt like mine. Halfway through packing, the floor creaked in the hallway. Marcus appeared leaning one shoulder against the frame, arms crossed. He didn't step inside. "So you're really leaving?" he asked, tone flat but not neutral. He was sizing me up the way he'd done since we were teenagers, and Dad had convinced him being older meant being superior. "Yes," I said without looking up. "You're overreacting." "I'm reacting," I corrected. "That's new for you to see." He pushed off the frame. "You embarrassed us." I paused mid-fold. "Did I?" "Yes," he snapped. "All my coworkers saw that article. Do you understand what it looks like that my own sister is some financial mastermind? And I had zero clue." "That's not my fault." "It makes me look uninvolved," he said, as if that were the greatest sin a brother could commit. "Like I don't even know my own family." "You don't," I said quietly. That stopped him. A subtle shift happened in his expression, something like acknowledgement, but it hardened too quickly to stay. "You could have told us," he said. "No," I replied, "I couldn't." Marcus frowned, almost offended by the truth. "Why not?" I finally met his eyes. "Because you and Dad would have laughed, or called it a phase, or said something like, 'Don't get ahead of yourself.'" His jaw worked for a moment. Then he muttered, "Well, you've sure gotten ahead of all of us now." He meant it as an accusation, but it landed like a confession. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "You think this article is good? You think it's something to celebrate?" "Yes," I said simply. "It's dangerous," he hissed. "People will expect things from you. Big things. They'll want to know every detail. They'll question everything." And that's different from home. How his ears reddened. He turned away, pacing the small space between my door and the bathroom. "Dad's furious," he said. "He says you ruined his birthday." "I didn't ruin anything," I said. "I just stopped pretending." "He wants you downstairs. I'm not coming." Marcus's laugh was sharp. "Of course not. You're too important now, right?" I zipped the suitcase slowly. "I'm just done being small." His footsteps stopped. The words hung between us like something irreversible. He stared at me, a flicker of something almost vulnerable crossing his face. Fear, disbelief, maybe jealousy. But it vanished as quickly as it surfaced. "You know," he said quietly, "Dad always said you'd run from responsibility the second things got hard." I stood. "And you believed him?" "Yes," he said without hesitation. I brushed past him toward the doorway. "Then maybe you should ask yourself why." Mom was waiting at the bottom of the stairs, hands wringing the hem of her sweater the way she did whenever conflict made her anxious. She reached out as if to stop me, fingers trembling. "Where will you go?" she whispered. "My apartment." "But—" Her lips shook. "You'll be alone there." "I'm already alone here," I said. Her shoulders sagged. She looked like she wanted to hug me, but decades of choosing Dad's comfort over mine kept her rooted in place. "I didn't know you were unhappy," she said softly. "Yes, you did," I replied. "You just looked away." A small wounded sound escaped her. I almost reached for her, almost broke the pattern of distance we'd both lived in, but the moment passed. Another choice she didn't make. Dad entered the hallway, expression thunderous. "You're leaving now?" "Yes." "Running," he corrected. I didn't bother arguing. "After everything we've done for you," he snapped. "After all the years." "What years?" I asked. "The ones where you dismissed me, mocked me, used me as a punchline, or the years where you pretended Marcus was the only child worth investing in?" His eyes widened, not because he disagreed, but because he wasn't used to hearing me say it out loud. "I'm not going to apologize for succeeding," I said, "especially not to people who never believed I could." Dad's jaw tightened. "You think the world is going to protect you? You think people out there care about you more than your family?" "No," I said. "I think they'll see me." "That's enough," he scoffed. "You'll regret this. I won't." The front door felt heavier than it should have as I opened it. The air outside hit my face crisp and grounding. Behind me, Mom whispered my name. I didn't turn around. The suitcase wheels bumped down the porch steps, echoing across the yard, each thud a tiny severing of another expectation they'd tried to cage me with. For a second, I paused at the bottom of the driveway, breathing in the release. Then I walked to my car, unlocked it, and placed the suitcase in the trunk. As the engine hummed to life, I didn't look back. I didn't need to. The version of me they knew was gone. The version they dismissed never existed. And the version they were about to meet, the one they underestimated into existence, was just getting started. By the time I reached my apartment, the sun had slipped behind a layer of soft gray clouds, turning the whole street a muted silver. The building looked exactly the way it had when I first moved in months ago, small, quiet, unremarkable. Everything my family dismissed, everything I needed. I carried my suitcase up the narrow stairwell, each step creaking beneath me. The hum of someone's TV drifted through a wall. A dog barked 2 floors down. Life happening around me, not to me. For once, I wasn't suffocating inside a house built by someone else's expectations. I unlocked my door, stepped inside, and exhaled. The air smelled faintly of coffee and lemon cleaner, familiar and safe. My safety. I set the suitcase beside the bed and kicked off my shoes. Without the weight of home pressing down on my chest, the silence felt different, warm instead of lonely. I powered on my laptop. It blinked awake like it already knew the day wasn't done reshaping everything. 3 new emails from Fenton. One from a venture fund I knew by reputation, only one of those names people whispered in boardrooms. 2 from journalists I had no intention of speaking to yet. My phone rang next an unfamiliar area code. I didn't answer. A voicemail popped up seconds later. I pressed play. Ms. Pierce, this is Julia Anderson from Skyline Capital. I'd like to discuss collaboration opportunities related to your private portfolio. We read the Forbes feature, and I ended the message, the corners of my mouth lifting without permission. Collaboration, recognition, respect. All the things I'd never heard inside Dad's house. The messages kept coming. LinkedIn requests, media inquiries, investor interest. The world had found my name, and for the first time, I wasn't hiding from it. I pulled the curtains open slightly. Rain had started to fall, tapping against the glass in soft, rhythmic beats. I watched the droplets race each other down the pane, feeling the kind of stillness that comes only after a storm, internal or otherwise. A knock sounded at my door. My stomach tightened. No one visited me here. I crossed the room quietly and checked the peephole. Marcus. Of course he'd come. He'd always been Dad's messenger when things needed cleaning up, smoothing over reframing. I opened the door halfway. How'd you find me? He lifted an eyebrow. You really think Dad doesn't know the address he co-signed when you moved out? Right? The one favor he'd never let me forget. The one I'd paid back months ago, but apparently that didn't matter. Can I come in? Marcus asked, hands shoved in his jacket pockets. I considered closing the door, but curiosity nudged me. Fine. He stepped inside, glancing around with the same judgment Dad used when he toured model homes. Smaller than I expected. It's mine, I said. That's what matters. He didn't answer. Instead, he paced slowly, stopping near my desk, where my laptop screen still glowed with unread emails. So everything in that article is real? He asked. Yes. He swallowed hard. And you never told me. You never asked, I replied. He stiffened. I would have listened. No, I said gently. You would have laughed. That hit him like I'd slapped him. His shoulders dropped slightly. Dad's worried. Dad's angry, I corrected. Not worried. He thinks people are going to judge him, Marcus said. They're calling, asking how his daughter got into private banking, asking why he never mentioned it. That's his problem, I replied. Not mine. He ran a hand through his hair. He feels blindsided. So do I said softly. Every time he dismisses me, every time he belittles my work, every time he tells people I'm just a cashier. Marcus fell silent. The hum of my refrigerator filled the space between us. You know, he said finally, Dad expected you to come back downstairs. He waited. That's been his pattern for years, I said. He pushes. I shrink. He wins. And now Marcus asked, I don't shrink anymore. He let out a slow breath, rubbing his jaw. Look, I didn't come here to fight. Then why are you here? He hesitated. Dad wants you home. He's embarrassed, Lana. I'm not responsible for how he feels. Marcus flinched at the bluntness. He wants to talk about what? How should I live smaller, quieter, more convenient for him? He said. If you apologize, I laughed, sharp and humorless. Apologize to succeed. Marcus didn't meet my eyes. The rain picked up outside, the sound steady and comforting. I walked past him and sat on the edge of my bed, elbows resting on my knees. Marcus, I said carefully, I'm not coming home. He lifted his head. So that's it. For now, I said. Until Dad realizes I'm not property to manage or a disappointment to control. His voice dropped to something small. I didn't come here only for him. That made me look up. He wasn't smiling, he wasn't smug, he wasn't posturing. He looked unsure. I don't understand how you did it, he admitted. I don't understand how you ended up bigger than all of us. I wasn't trying to be bigger, I said softly. I was trying to be myself. He stared at the rug like he was trying to read something there. I always thought Dad was right, he whispered. About you, about what you were capable of. My chest tightened. Not with anger, but with a grief I didn't expect. And now I asked. His voice cracked. Now I'm not so sure. We didn't speak after that. The silence wasn't hostile this time. It was reflective, heavy, necessary. After a minute, he turned toward the door. Dad's not going to let this go, he said quietly. I know. You should prepare for that. I am. He nodded once, then opened the door. He hesitated as if wanting to say something more, but the words didn't form. Good night, Lana. Good night." When the door clicked shut, the room felt calmer again, lighter as though his visit had carried out the last of the weight I'd been holding for years. I walked back to the window and watched the rain trail its silver lines down the glass. Dad's world had cracked. Marcus's world was shifting. Mine was finally beginning. My phone buzzed nonstop the next morning, vibrating across my nightstand like it was trying to escape. I squinted at the screen notifications stacked in endless rows. Emails from investors, journalists, former classmates I barely remembered. 3 voicemails from numbers with country codes. A request from a financial podcast I used to listen to during my cashier breaks back when I was invisible. And 1 text from Mom. "Call your father. It's urgent." I ignored it, rolled out of bed and opened my curtains. The sky was still gray, the kind that made the city feel softer than it really was. Down on the sidewalk, people walked their dogs, carried coffees, and jogged past like every morning. No one looked up to see the girl whose face had appeared on financial news feeds overnight. It was perfect. I brewed coffee and settled into my desk chair, my real command center, not the cash register my family believed defined me. The laptop hummed awake. More alerts, more inquiries, more proof that people out there, the ones who actually understood my field, valued what I had built. I opened an email from Fenton with the subject line, "Strategic Next Steps. Prepare for acceleration. The exposure is increasing your valuation. Expect significant inquiries in the next 48 hours. I'll filter what you don't need to see." I smiled. The world was finally catching up to what I already knew. Before I could respond, my phone rang again, this time with a name I recognized. Cole, my high school ex. The boy who once told me I'd peak early said girls like me should aim small so we don't get disappointed later. I answered. "Hello?" He cleared his throat. "Lana." "Hey, wow. Big article, huh?" "Very big," I said, sipping my coffee. "So, congrats. Really impressive. Didn't know you were into banking stuff. I don't broadcast everything," I replied. He laughed awkwardly. "Yeah, no kidding. Listen, some of us from high school were talking. We're planning a little reunion. You should come. People would love to see you." "That's surprising," I said. "Why?" "Because people never wanted to see me before." He froze. That's not fair. It's accurate." Silence settled. Thick, heavy. He finally said, "Look, I just thought you'd want to be part of it now. You know, with your success." There it was. Not admiration. Not respect. Clout. "No thanks," I said. "Good luck with your reunion." I ended the call before he could respond. A soft satisfaction rippled through me. Not spiteful, just steady, like reclaiming a piece of myself I didn't realize was missing. A knock sounded at the door. My stomach tightened. I crossed the room and looked through the peephole. Not Marcus, not Dad, Mom. Her posture was small, shrinking into her coat, as if she expected to be scolded just for being outside. Her hands were clasped tightly around her purse. I opened the door only halfway. "How'd you know where I lived?" She offered a faint, nervous smile. "Your brother told us. He didn't mean to betray your privacy. Your father insisted." "Of course he did." "Can I come in?" she asked gently. I hesitated before nodding. She stepped inside and looked around the apartment like she was walking through a museum of a life she'd never bothered asking about. She looked around with a soft smile. "It's lovely. It finally feels like it belongs to me," I said. She flinched at my tone, eyes dropping to the rug. "Your father is very upset. I'm not responsible for his emotions." Her breath caught. "You sound so cold." "Mom, I'm tired." "That's different." She walked toward the window, fingers drifting across the sill. "I know your father is difficult." "Difficult," I repeated. "He's cruel." She winced but didn't deny it. "Not this time. He was raised to believe certain things about girls and boys, about roles, about importance. And he never questioned any of it," I said. "No," she whispered, and I never questioned him. The honesty surprised me. Mom didn't admit things like this. She smoothed them, swallowed them, pretended, until the truth dissolved somewhere behind her smile. Your father grew up thinking men lead and women follow, she said. I followed him, and I taught you to follow too. You taught me to be small. Her shoulders tightened. I softened my voice. I'm not angry that you didn't know better. I'm angry that you didn't want to. Tears gathered in her eyes, but she blinked them back. I'm trying now. I crossed my arms. Why are you here, Mom? She turned to me, face pale. People are talking. Your father's coworkers, our neighbors. Everyone saw the article. They're saying he must have been a terrible parent not to know what you were doing. He was, I said simply. Her breath hitched at the harshness. Your father wants you to fix it, she said, to take it down. Or say it was exaggerated. He thinks it's ruining his reputation. I stared at her. My success is ruining his reputation. She swallowed hard. He said it makes him look like he wasn't involved in your life. He wasn't, I said. She looked down. If you don't defend him, he'll fall apart. He's already falling apart, I said. And that's not my fault. Mom reached for my hand, but I pulled back. Please, she whispered. He's hurting. And I hurt for years, I replied. Did anyone come rescue me? Did anyone defend me? Did anyone stop the jokes, the comparisons, the dismissals? Her silence was the answer. I took a step back, voice steady. I'm not going back there. I'm not shrinking. I'm not apologizing. And I will not destroy the life I built to protect Dad's ego. She looked at me with something new fear mixed with pride she didn't want to admit. You've changed, she whispered. No, I said. I've finally become who I was supposed to be. Mom stepped toward the door slowly, pausing with her hand on the knob. If you walk away from us like this, I don't know what will happen. I do, I said. You'll have to face yourselves. She opened the door with trembling fingers. Before stepping out, she looked back. For the first time in my life, I saw her as a woman, not a mother carrying her own regrets like stones in her pockets. I hope this success of yours makes you happy, she said. It already has. She nodded once and disappeared down the stairwell. The door clicked shut behind her, and the quiet wrapped around me like armor. Guilt never touched me. Fear stayed at a distance. Solitude felt more like freedom than absence. For the first time, I felt free. And freedom, it turned out, sounded a lot like finally hearing your own voice without anyone talking over it. The email from Aurelium Private Bank arrived at 6:14 a.m., tucked between investor inquiries and a reminder from my utility company. The subject line was so ordinary it almost fooled me. Follow up on institutional integration. I clicked it expecting routine documentation. Instead, I froze. They wanted to acquire my entire micro-banking network. All of it. At a valuation I'd only seen in case studies about unicorn founders. The number was obscene, the kind that rearranged the trajectory of a person's life in one stroke. I reread it 3 times, blinking hard to make sure I wasn't hallucinating before the coffee kicked in. But the offer was real specific, detailed, and already approved by 2 committees. My chest tightened with something between awe and disbelief. I reached for my phone to call Marcus, then paused. No. First, I needed clarity, no one else's thoughts. I replied to the email requesting a meeting, then shut the laptop as if it might burst into flames. The room felt too small for the decision sitting in front of me. A knock jolted me from my daze. Marcus stood on the other side of the door in running gear, cheeks pink from the morning cold. He leaned casually against the frame like this was any other day. You didn't answer my text, he said. Thought I'd stop by. It took me a second to process words again. Come in. He stepped inside, and immediately his expression sharpened. What happened? I handed him my phone with the email open. His eyes scanned the screen, widening with every line. Lana, he whispered. This is massive. I know. Are you okay? I think so, I said. Mostly. He set the phone down and looked at me with that steady focus I was still learning to trust. This is the kind of offer legacy banks give to disruptors they're scared of. They want you in-house so they don't have to compete with you. I guessed that, I said softly. So the question is, do you want to be absorbed or do you want to stay independent? I let out a laugh that wasn't quite a laugh. That's what I've been trying to figure out. Marcus reached for my hand but didn't take it. He stopped just short, giving me space to choose. I took his hand because I wanted to, not because I needed grounding. What do you want? he asked. I exhaled slowly. I want to build something huge, but I also want protection, reach, infrastructure, and independence, all at once. He smiled, brushing his thumb lightly over my knuckles. You can negotiate for any of those things. Before I could respond, my phone rang. Dad. The name burned on the screen like a warning. Marcus raised an eyebrow. You don't have to answer. I know, I said. But I did anyway. Dad's voice came through sharp and loud. So this is it. You're all over the news and you don't think you owe your family an explanation. No, I said calmly. I don't. His breath crackled with anger. You made us look like fools. No, I corrected. You did that yourselves. You listened to me, he snapped. I want you home tonight. We're having a family meeting and you will be there. No, I said again. I won't. Silence. Dangerous, icy silence. You think you're better than us now. I think I finally understand who I am, I replied, and I'm not going back. He scoffed. You're forgetting who raised you. I'm remembering exactly who raised me. He didn't know what to do with that. His voice cracked along the edges. You're ruining this family. No, Dad, I said. I just stopped letting this family ruin me. The line went dead without a goodbye. I lowered the phone, chest rising with a slow breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. Marcus didn't speak. He didn't try to soothe. He didn't offer advice I didn't ask for. He just stood there giving me quiet. And that quiet was the safest place I'd had in years. I moved to the window and watched the city walking below the buses, the cyclists, the restaurant workers rolling up metal gates. People living their lives without knowing the girl in apartment 3C was deciding her future shape. My laptop pinged. Aurelium Bank. We're ready whenever you are. I sat down again, shoulders steadying with the weight and promise of the moment. Marcus leaned against the table, arms crossed, eyes bright with something like pride. What's your next move? He asked. I started typing a reply. Negotiation, I said. I built this alone. No way I'm selling myself short. He grinned. That's my girl. I paused at the phrase, not because it bothered me, but because of how natural it felt coming from someone who saw me as an equal, not a subordinate. My email was sent with a soft chime. I closed the laptop. Come on, I said, grabbing my jacket. I need air, and pancakes, and maybe a life coach. Marcus laughed. I can help with 2 out of 3. We headed out into the cool morning, and as the door clicked shut behind us, something inside me clicked into place too slowly, firmly, undeniably. For the first time in years, I wasn't running from something. I was running toward something, toward the life I wanted, toward the empire I was no longer afraid to claim. The first alert hit my phone before sunrise. Forbes mystery founder. Behind micro banking network revealed. My name, my full name was in the headline, and below it, the number that changed everything, $2.5 billion. I stared at the screen long enough for the device to dim, then brighten again when I tapped it with a shaking thumb. My throat tightened. Somehow, even after all the quiet building, all the strategic moves, all the steady nights of coding and structuring and calculating, seeing it out in the open felt unreal. A second notification appeared, then a third. Within minutes, my phone turned into a live wire. Marcus showed up half-dressed for work, tie draped around his neck, still tangled. His knuckles tapped lightly on my door before he eased it open. You're trending, he said. Everywhere. He wasn't exaggerating. Financial analysts were explaining my model on morning shows. Podcasters were arguing whether my silent build method would disrupt the future of independent banking. Reddit threads were running wild with speculation about who I really was and how the empire slipped under the radar. But the loudest noise came from my hometown. Dad texted first. What have you done? Call me now. Then Mom. Your father is very upset. Please come talk to him. This isn't how families operate. And finally, Cole. So you were hiding money and success from us. Unbelievable. I set the phone down like it was something fragile and burning hot at the same time. Marcus watched me carefully. You don't owe them anything. I know, I said. But part of me, some leftover child-shaped ache, still tightened at the thought of Dad's voice. Before I could spiral, my laptop pinged again. This time it was from Aurelium Bank. We've proceeded internally to push your story to the media in anticipation of public partnership. Congratulations, Lana. The world knows what we already did. You're a financial force. I read the email aloud to Marcus. He exhaled softly. They're locking in your valuation by controlling the narrative. Smart, aggressive, manipulative, I added. He nodded. That too. But it benefits you as long as you steer it. I sat down at the kitchen table, the same spot where I'd once counted tip money from late shifts. Funny how space didn't define a person, choices did. My reflection in the dark window looked different. Not richer, not more powerful, just aware. Dad called. The screen flashed bright angry. Marcus met my eyes. You don't have to answer. I know, I whispered. And this time I didn't. Silence hummed between us, warm and steady. He sat across from me. What do you want today to be about panic celebration strategy? None of that, I said. I just want to breathe. He smiled. Then breathe. We left the apartment and walked through the morning crowd. People hurried to work sipping coffee, scrolling through their own headlines, unaware that the woman weaving through them was the subject of the one lighting up every major outlet. On the corner outside a bakery, two women chatted loudly. Did you see that cashier girl, one said? The billionaire wild. My stomach tightened. They didn't know it was me standing 5 feet behind them. The other replied, her family must be eating their words. Only then did I take a slow breath and let it settle into something close to peace. By noon, interviews were flooding my inbox. CNBC, Bloomberg, a podcast for female founders, a women's finance magazine that wanted a cover story, investor panels, keynote invites, networking events, all wanting a piece of the narrative. I accepted only one, the Women's Finance magazine. Because I knew its readers, women who'd been dismissed, minimized, talked over, needed the story most. As I typed my responses, another email popped up. A message from a girl I went to high school with, one of the ones who laughed when I worked after school at the grocery store. She wrote, Lana, you've inspired me today. I thought my job defined me. Watching your story unfold, I think maybe I've been wrong. Thank you. I felt something shift inside, something heavy loosening. The moment didn't need drama or a grand finish. Truth simply settled in, quiet and undeniable, finally resting where it always should have been. But the peace didn't last long. At 3:22 in the afternoon, Mom called. I didn't answer, but she left a voicemail, her voice frantic and uneven. Your father says you humiliated us. Your brother is furious. Lana, you need to stop this. Pull the articles down. Correct the misunderstanding. The neighbors are talking. Your dad hasn't come out of his den all morning. You're tearing this family apart. I replayed the message once, then twice. Something inside me hardened, not cruelly, but cleanly. I looked at Marcus. They'll never see me as anything but what makes them comfortable. Then stop trying to fit inside their version of you. I nodded. Evening settled in, casting long shadows across my apartment. The city buzzed louder than usual, the way it always did when something big happened. I stood near the window watching headlights smear past like streaks of restless light. A message popped onto my phone from an unknown number. This is Aurelium's board. We'd like a response to our acquisition offer by the end of week. Your valuation is rising by the hour. Let's talk soon. I typed back. We'll talk when I'm ready. Not before. Marcus read over my shoulder. Nice. I shrugged lightly. They want me more than I want them. That gives me leverage. You're starting to sound like a founder who knows her worth. Maybe I'm finally believing it. As midnight neared, noise online reached a fever pitch. My face appeared beside graphs, charts, and speculation videos. Comment sections filled with shock admiration, critiques, conspiracy theories. But through all of that, one truth anchored me. The girl they once mocked for a tiny cashier job no longer existed. In her place stood someone who had built power quietly, brick by brick, without applause or permission. And now the world finally recognized what my family never bothered to see. I closed my laptop. Tomorrow would demand choices that actually mattered. Tonight, I let myself hold one small, steady thought. I made it. Without them. Because of me. Dad insisted on the family dinner like it was a summons from a courtroom he believed he still presided over. A text arrived early in the morning, short-clipped and dripping, with the authority he'd always assumed I'd obey be at the house by 6. We're discussing the situation. The situation. $2.5 billion in assets, an empire they never imagined existed behind my silence. What they once mocked as a meaningless job now stands at the center of global finance headlines. The life they tried to shrink has expanded far beyond anything they can touch. I didn't reply. I simply showed up. Because I needed this. Not for revenge, at least not the loud kind. Closure mattered more than revenge. That house, that table, that family, I needed them to stop haunting the edges of my life. The driveway looked the same as when I'd snuck out as a teenager, cracked pavement, and an old basketball hoop leaning left like it had given up years ago. Cole's truck was parked confidently in the center spot like always. Mom's car was tucked timidly to the side. I walked up the porch steps slowly, grounding myself with each breath. Marcus had offered to drive me to wait nearby to talk after, but this part had to be done alone. Some chapters demanded solitude. Mom opened the door before I knocked like she'd been watching from the window. Her eyes darted to my clothes, my face, my posture searching for signs of arrogance or brokenness. She didn't hug me. "We've all been very stressed," she whispered, pulling her cardigan tight. "Your father especially." I stepped inside. I'm sure he has. Cole was already at the dining table with a beer in hand, legs stretched out like he owned the place. He didn't say hello. He smirked instead. "So little sis," he drawled. "Guess you think you're a big shot now." Dad entered behind him, shoulders squared, chest puffed out. His voice boomed like I was still 16. "Sit! We're not dragging this out." I sat, not because he told me to, but because staying standing would show how little authority he had left, and I wanted this to play out slowly, cleanly. Dad started talking before anyone took a bite. "You embarrassed this family. You made us look like idiots. People at church are asking questions. My coworkers think I raised some sort of con artist." His jaw tightened. "And you will fix it." I leaned back, hands folded loosely in my lap. "Fix what?" His face reddened. "This Forbes nonsense. It's accurate," I said. "All of it." "Don't," he snapped, stabbing a finger toward me. "Do not sit there and act like you built some massive company without any help. You're lying or manipulating people or reframing the story was the only trick he had left. Every excuse he reached for collapsed under its own weight. No matter how he twisted it, the fault circled back to him. The word hung in the air like a lazy punch that never landed. I cut him off. "Why is it easier for you to believe I'm a fraud than to believe I succeeded?" The room went silent for a beat. Mom reached for a breadbasket with trembling hands. "Maybe we should all just calm down." "No," Dad snarled. "She needs to understand where she came from." I met his stare without blinking. "I came here. I didn't stay here." Cole barked a laugh. "You think you're better than us?" "No," I said. "I think I'm better than who I was when I let you convince me I'd never be anything." Dad slammed his fist on the table hard enough for the glasses to rattle. "This family sacrificed for you." "What sacrifice?" My voice finally rose, not loud, but sharp, mocking my job, laughing at me, treating me like the family errand girl, acting like every dream I had was a joke. Mom flinched. Cole scoffed. Dad looked almost offended that I dared speak the truth aloud. "You're being dramatic," he said. "You were a cashier." "That's not a career. That's pocket change. That pocket change job funded the prototype for my first banking app," I said quietly. "Every hour I worked there helped launch what Forbes wrote about." Dad's mouth opened and closed like he couldn't compute the math, so I leaned in. "You thought you were belittling me," I said, "but you were financing me." Cole rolled his eyes, but they were jittery now, nervous around the edges. "Come on. You expect us to believe you built some giant business without telling anyone I didn't tell people who mocked everything I did," I said. "That's the difference." Dad shoved his chair back, pacing the room. "You don't lie to your family. You don't hide success. You don't—" "You hid plenty," I replied softly. "Respect, support, encouragement. Those were secrets in this house." Mom looked like she wanted to disappear. "Lana, sweetheart, don't," I said gently. "Please don't soften this. You let it happen." Her eyes filled, but she didn't deny it. Dad stopped pacing. So what now? You're rich, so you think you can cut us out. I didn't say that. But you want to, Cole said. I didn't answer, because wanting freedom wasn't cruelty, it was survival. Dad leaned over the table, pointing at me with the same finger he used to use when lecturing me about schoolwork, chores, curfew. You will apologize for humiliating us, he demanded. You will make a statement. You will explain that this was all exaggerated, and you will stop this nonsense before it ruins our reputation. I stared at him for a long, steady moment. Then I stood. No, I said. I won't apologize for succeeding. His face contorted. Sit down, no. Lana. I picked up my coat. This isn't my shame to carry anymore. As I turned toward the door, Mom called after me, voice shaking. Please don't leave like this. I paused, hand on the doorknob. If you ever want a relationship with me, I said without turning around, it has to be one where I'm not the family scapegoat. Her silence was enough. When I stepped outside, the cool night air hit my skin like relief. A release, a quiet promise. My phone buzzer, a message from Marcus. You okay? I typed back. I will be. For the first time, I really will be. And as I walked down the porch steps, leaving the house that built me but never believed in me, I felt something settle inside my chest. Not bitterness. Freedom. Marcus arrived at my apartment the next morning with 2 coffees and a look that told me he already knew the family dinner had detonated exactly the way we both expected. He didn't ask for details. He just handed me the stronger coffee, the one he knew I preferred when my world felt too loud. Before I could say anything, my laptop chimed. Aurelium Bank was requesting a final meeting. Not optional, not exploratory. Final. I opened the email slowly, almost cautiously, like the words inside might rearrange the shape of my life again. Lana, we're prepared to offer you the largest independent acquisition package in our history. We'd like to present terms in person today. No pressure, only potential. Your work deserves a global stage. My breath hitched. Marcus leaned against the counter, arms crossed. This is it. It feels too fast, I whispered. That's because your family made you believe you didn't deserve momentum, he said. But you do. I couldn't speak for a moment. The contrast between the night before the chaos, the accusations, the desperation in Dad's voice, and this moment was jarring. The family saw me as a threat to their story. Aurelium saw me as a force. By early afternoon, I was sitting in a polished glass conference room 30 floors above the city. The view stretched across the skyline, the kind of panorama meant to seduce ambition. A board of 5 executives sat across from me, immaculate in dark suits and measured smiles. The chairwoman, Evelyn Hart, slid a folder toward me. Lana, she said, her voice crisp but warm, your work has already changed the microbanking landscape. We want to bring you into our network, not to erase your vision, but to magnify it. My pulse thrummed. You're offering to buy my company, I said. All of it. We're offering to partner, she corrected. You retain operational creative control. We fund expansion. We integrate your model into our global infrastructure. You become the youngest executive board member in Aurelium history. Board member, I echoed, with full voting rights. Evelyn nodded. You're not a figurehead. You're a leader. Another executive leaned forward. Your valuation is rising by the hour. You built something no one saw coming. We want to harness that brilliance, not overshadow it. The number sat on the page in front of me. Large, life-changing, historic. But there was something else, too, something buried deeper in the terms. They wanted me not just for what I'd built, but for what I could build next. A place where my ideas could finally stand on their own. A tomorrow shaped by choice, not permission. My throat tightened. Dad had called me pointless. Cole had laughed at my cashier job. Mom had watched it happen. And here I was, being asked to help run a global institution. Marcus's voice echoed in my head. You can negotiate anything. So I did. For me to consider this, I said, meeting their eyes one by one, I need 3 things. Evelyn smiled faintly. We're listening. 1, full autonomy over my design team. 0 interference. Done. 2, no restructuring for the first 12 months. My people stay protected. Agreed. And 3, I exhaled, steadying myself. Public acknowledgement. Not for ego, for accuracy. I don't want the narrative warped by anyone corporate or personal. We'll let you write the announcement yourself, Evelyn said. Unedited. My chest loosened. Then I'm interested. The room buzzed, small smiles flickering across composed faces. Aurelium Bank had just secured their deal, and I had secured my future. On the drive home, the world outside the windows looked sharper, brighter, as if everything had been slightly out of focus until now. The city lights felt like a constellation of choices I finally had access to. My phone buzzed, non-stop notifications from financial analysts, journalists, even business schools asking if they could feature my model in their curriculum. But one message stood out, from Mom. Your father wants to talk. He says he didn't mean what he said. He's upset. Please call him when you can. My fingers hovered over the screen, not out of fear, out of realization. Dad didn't want reconciliation. He wanted proximity to power. I set the phone down without replying. That evening, Marcus joined me on the roof of my building. We sat with takeout containers between us, watching the sky shift from gold to deep navy. So he said gently, "Are you proud?" I didn't answer right away. For years, pride had felt dangerous, like a spark that might burn bridges I wasn't allowed to cross. But tonight, something inside me finally clicked into place. I am, I said quietly. I really am. Marcus didn't congratulate me. He didn't praise me. He simply said, "Good." The wind brushed past us, cool and soft, carrying away the last traces of the girl who once thought she needed her family's approval to have worth. A version of me they once defined no longer exists. The cashier they mocked lives only in their memory, not in mine. The daughter they overlooked has stepped out of the shadows for good. No more standing at the edges of my own story. A billion-dollar empire now rises from the ground I built myself, the architect of a system that would help millions. And tomorrow, I would sign the partnership that changed everything. But tonight, I let myself feel the power of it, quiet, steady, unshakable. For the first time, the world wasn't ignoring me. The world was listening. The morning I signed the Aurelium partnership, the city felt different, sharper around the edges, as if the skyline itself understood something irreversible was about to happen. My signature made the deal official at 9:27 a.m. But the shift inside me had begun long before the ink dried. By noon, every major financial outlet had picked up the story. By 3, my inbox overflowed with invitations, panels, mentorship programs, keynote requests. By sunset, my life had expanded into something I once thought belonged only to other people. But the moment that truly changed me didn't come from the headlines. It came from the knock on my apartment door at 8:45 that night. Mom stood in the hallway clutching her purse like it was the only stable thing in her world. Her hair was pinned neatly. Her sweater pressed her face lined with worry, so familiar it almost hurt to see. "I didn't want to call first," she said quietly. "I wasn't sure you'd pick up." I stepped back, letting her inside. She moved cautiously, as if she expected the place to reject her. "I came alone," she added quickly. "Your father, well, he's angry. But more than that, he's embarrassed." I said nothing. Silence wasn't cruelty, it was clarity. She sat at the small table near the window, smoothing her sweater over her lap. "Your brother hasn't spoken much today," she continued. "He's been reading everything online. He didn't know you were... all of this." Again, I let the words hang. After a long moment, she inhaled shakily. "Lana, I want to apologize." I looked at her then, really looked. For years, she stood by without stopping them, without seeing me, without choosing me. Her apology couldn't rewrite any of that, but it could acknowledge it. For what I asked. Her lips trembled. For letting them make you feel small. For not standing up when your father belittled your job. For laughing when Cole did. For letting you believe you were less than the brilliant woman you've always been. I blinked slowly, the words landing in places that had been bruised for so long they'd forgotten how tenderness felt. She reached toward me but stopped halfway. "I should have protected you," she whispered. "I didn't. I'm sorry. There was a time I would have begged for this moment, a time when her apology would have been everything. Now it wasn't a door opening, it was simply truth finally spoken aloud. "I appreciate you saying it," I said softly. "But Mom, it doesn't change who you chose all those years." Her eyes filled. "I know. I can't undo it. She wiped her cheek. "I don't want to lose you. You don't have to," I said. "But the terms are different now." Relief flickered across her face, gentle and fragile. I walked her to the door. As she stepped into the hallway, she turned back. "I'm proud of you, Lana. I always was. I just didn't know how to show it." I nodded. "Good night, Mom." When the door closed behind her, I leaned against it, letting the weight of the day settle. Not crushing, not overwhelming, just real. Minutes later, my phone buzzed. "Marcus. Did everything go okay? Do you need company?" I smiled. Not because I needed company, but because someone cared enough to ask. "Come over," I typed. "I want to tell you something." 10 minutes later, he stood in my doorway, hair damp from a rushed shower sweatshirt half-zipped. "How'd it go?" he asked. I curled up on the couch, motioning him closer. Strange, hard, necessary. He sat beside me, leaving just enough space for choice. Did she apologize? She did. He studied my face. And it helped. I admitted, but it didn't fix anything. He nodded. That sounds right. I exhaled deeply. It's weird. I spent so long trying to prove myself to them. But today, when I stood in that boardroom, when I signed that contract, I realized I wasn't thinking about them at all. "Good," he said softly. "I didn't build this to spite them. I built it because I was meant to." Marcus smiled. Not wide, not proud, just warm. Exactly. We talked for hours about the partnership, the future of the platform, how the world was reacting, how my life had turned into something neither of us quite believed yet. When he finally stood to leave, he paused at the door. "You know, he said you didn't just create a banking empire. You created a blueprint for every woman who's ever been underestimated." "Maybe," I said with a small shrug. "Mostly, I created a life where I don't disappear." He stepped forward, brushed his thumb lightly across my cheek, and whispered, "You were never meant to disappear." After he left, I walked to the window looking out over the city lights, each one a tiny version of possibility. For the first time, the view didn't intimidate me. It felt like home. My laptop still sat open on the table, the Aurelium contract glowing faint gold on the screen. I closed it gently, not because I was done working, but because the day had already given me enough. I turned off the lights and let the quiet settle around me like a promise. I wasn't waiting for anyone to tell me I mattered. Their approval no longer had a place in my life. Whatever recognition they withheld, I had already given to myself. I had my name. My work finally had room to breathe. The life I built stood solid beneath my feet, and I stood in it fully without apology. And if this story meant something to you, if the quiet revenge, the transformation, the resilience, the rise resonated even a little, tell me in the comments what moment hit you the hardest. If you haven't yet hit like, subscribe, and stay with me for more stories of women reclaiming their power in the shadows and then stepping boldly into the light, because sometimes the loudest revenge is a life